To document or not to document? That is the question. It's important to understand that when using sources for a research paper, it's important to give credit where credit is due. So in terms of today, we'll call that tagging sources. You may also hear it referred to as documenting or citing sources. For our case, we use APA format. So let's take a little bit of a look at what this means for us in terms of our research papers. We've learned throughout the history of going to school that anytime we quote something directly, we should attribute it or tag it to the person who said it first. And we do that by using quotation marks so that the person reading our paper knows where the quote begins at the word students here on our screen, and it ends at the word notes. And so we are assuming that if we look back at the source where this came from, which you can see is cited in red, Lester, 1976, on pages 46 to 47 of the source, we would find this exact quote word for word on those pages, assuming at the bottom of 46, top of 47. So we know that we should give credit where credit is due in terms of quotes. But sometimes where students kind of forget to give credit is in paraphrasing. And what is a paraphrase? Well, a paraphrase is when you read something in a book or a magazine or a journal article and you put it in your own words. It's kind of like when you go to the movies and somebody asks you about a scene, you don't give word for word dialogue of the scene, you give it back in your own words. But you refer to the movie or the character who said the line in your rephrasing of it. And remember, this was not your material to begin with. So you have to cite it, which is what bullet point number 2 is saying, when accompanied by accurate documentation. And again, for our case, that's APA. A paraphrase is not a word-for-word quote, and it's a little longer than a summary. And a summary is the same thing, putting something in your own words, but a much shortened version, which again should be accompanied by a citation. So I'll give you time to look at the original on the left. This is the original information from the source by Lester in 1976, taken from Writing Research Papers, which was a book. And so that's given at the end on the left-hand side under original. On the right-hand side is the student's version. It's color-coded to show you that although it seems the student has put this in his or her own words, really all they've done is kind of flip some words around. So we see the original says students frequently, and our student says frequently students. There's the word overuse. We have overuse. We have taking notes is now note-taking. Only about 10%, only about 10%. What you're seeing here is what we like to call patch writing, where I've taken patches of the original, I flip some words around, and although the student thinks that it's in his or her own words, it's actually a little bit closer to the original than most English teachers would like. What about this version? Looks a little better, right? In research papers, students often quote excessively, failing to keep quoted material down. Since the problem originates in note-taking, it's essential to minimize it. It's better, right? This is a much better version. Unfortunately, the version on the right is plagiarized. Why? There's no citation. So although sometimes in research we get bogged down with we have 4 sources in front of us and we're taking material, it's really important to keep track of where you get material from. If this were to come up in a safe assign checker, it would come up as this was taken from somewhere. So you have to make sure that you're always citing the material. So again, you would do that in APA. So what does it mean to signal the material or put the material in your source, in your paper, based on what the source said? In APA, we can start with the author's last name and the year in quotation, parentheses, right after it. And there's our paraphrase with the page numbers at the end. This is like hashtagging it. I'm tagging it so if others want to find it, they can. Another way to do it is we can also put the source information right at the end all together. Last name, year, and page numbers. This is a summary because notice it's just one sentence based on the original, which was about 3 sentences in length. So a summary is a shortened version, but again must be cited in order to avoid plagiarism and to give credit where credit is due. This should help you as you move on to work on your research paper. Please know that you need to check with your instructor on how many quotes you can use in a paper. Some instructors have limitations because an overly quoted paper is really just a cut and paste version and doesn't show any analysis of the material. So check with your instructor for how many quotes you can have in a paper. For the most part, your paper will be paraphrase and summary. But again, remember, hashtag it. Make sure to tag the author of the original to give credit where credit is due.